Good evening and welcome. You're watching the Newshour Agenda. I'm Padmaja Joshi. It's almost following to a script. When part 1 of the BBC documentary on Mr. Modi's role in the Gujarat riots was released on the 17th of this month, we predicted here on the Newshour that this documentary will be used to try and revive the Butcher of Gujarat narrative. And so here it is. First came the documentary, then it was used to try and lobby various governments to condemn India based on the documentary. And now, despite a ban, the exponents in India of freedom of speech have decided that they will screen this documentary across the country, all in the interest of freedom of expression. But what was really spectacular was the attempt to try and get friendly countries to damn India and damn the Modi government based on what BBC says. First, it was done inside the UK Parliament, and today it was the turn of the US Home Department. Listen in.
Does the Prime Minister agree with his diplomats in the Foreign Office that Modi was directly responsible, and just what more does the Foreign Office know of his involvement in this grave act of ethnic cleansing?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the UK government's position on this has been clear and long-standing and hasn't changed. Of course, we don't tolerate persecution where it appears anywhere, but I'm not sure I agree at all with the characterisation that the honourable gentleman has put forward.
I'm not aware of this documentary that you point to, but what I will say broadly is that there are a number of elements that undergird the global strategic partnership that we have with our Indian partners. There are close political ties, there are economic ties, there are exceptionally deep people-to-people ties between the United States and India. But one of those additional elements are the values that we share, the values that are common to American democracy and to Indian democracy. India, of course, is the world's largest democracy. It's a vibrant democracy. And again, we look to everything that ties us together, and we look to reinforce all of those elements that tie us together.
And this desperation isn't limited to the UK and US, where sadly these efforts have been rebuffed so far. In India, the documentary has suddenly become the touchstone of all those who stand for freedom of expression. In Kerala, screenings were held across cities from Thiruvananthapuram to Kozhikode to Ernakulam by the left-aligned students' unions. A similar screening was planned in the Jawaharlal Nehru University right here in Delhi, and the Congress has now promised that similar screenings will be organized by them across the country among public spaces or in campuses. After all, as the Congress MP Rahul Gandhi today said, truth has a way of coming out.
See, giving clean sheet is in order is a completely, it's not a clean sheet for Narendra Modi. Actually, it's, this BBC is a, dedicated media, and it was, truly, very sensible media. And that media, want to show what was happened in the Gujarat in the 2002. See, Youth Congress only want to make sure that if there is something, hide to the government, there is something to hide for the government, Youth Congress want to make sure that this video will, reach to every common people.
Ban is the question that has not happened, which is very clear to you, right?
Yes.
Ban has not happened, that is very clear. So that's there. Criticisms will come. That's what we are here for, right? If you are open to rational thinking and if you are open to dialogue, criticisms will be there, it's fine. As far as it's not banned, we can screen it, right? We can legally do it, right? Yes.
So obvious, if it is hurting them, they will criticize. So let's see what's inside the documentary. I wish you also see that. Has it banned?
Yeah, take down.
Yeah, it's not banned, right? Until it's banned, you can see it's legally allowed in the campus.
Which leads one to ask, is this really about truth and free speech, or has this BBC documentary become the last resort, the last fond hope of an opposition in an effort to try and create a narrative against Mr. Modi before the general elections of 2024? Has the entire Modi bloc now pinned all its hopes on this one documentary, India Modi question, before the elections, hoping that it will help them revive the Butcher of Gujarat narrative? And now, with the United States and UK pretty much putting paid to that effort, what next?
You're watching the News Hour at 10, debate number 1 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
All right, joining us now on the debate, we have Sanju Verma, national spokesperson of the BJP, Sanjay Chad, author, Anthony Chaturian, columnist, pardon me for the pronunciation, Akashdeep Muni, political analyst. Let me first go across, though, to American singer and actor Mary Millben, who also spoke today about the BBC documentary. It's very interesting, the comment that you made, ma'am. We've heard a number of voices coming from the US, the UK. Of course, officially, both governments have refused to endorse this documentary. Why did you say that India must stand up against this documentary? You, of all people, are an artist. You should be all about freedom of speech, BBC saying what it wants to.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I tell you, I did watch the documentary, and let me say my comments are certainly in reverence to those families and victims of the heinous acts of religious persecution. We're seeing the rise of religious persecution certainly across the world. So I want to say that my comments are in reverence to that. But this documentary, you have to look at these things from a 30,000 feet level. This documentary was thrown out at a time when India is heading into an election. Certainly, there's no question that Prime Minister Modi, who I certainly support, is headed to a victory, certainly, to continue serving as Prime Minister following 2024. And so, you know, the voices of colonialism certainly would like to remind folks of India's past rather than focusing on India's present and future. And that certainly is bright under the Prime Minister. And so this documentary, it's just sad that it's presented at this time, and certainly in the way that it's been shared, it certainly does not affect the relationship of the United States and India. America and India are global partners that share a common value and democratic values. And so as we wave the banner of freedom here and free speech and certainly free enterprise, so does India. And so my encouragement certainly to the Prime Minister in India and those certainly who support the Prime Minister is respond. The best way to respond when voices of colonialism arise, respond with a message of freedom. That's what India is going to celebrate here soon in a couple of days with the celebration of Republic Day. Respond with the positives, the developments that the Prime Minister has put in place to advance India to greater measures of freedom. You know, the Prime Minister specifically has focused India in a direction that has placed the country in a very strategic position, a strategic economic position on the advancements that the Prime Minister is making in technology, certainly in infrastructure, agricultural advancements that's bringing great measures of free enterprise to farmers and those that are working the land, certainly the capital investments and the developments in trade on developing a real supply chain there in India so that it can be a greater focal point for trade in the region. So, you know, again, you have to look at these things at 30,000 feet. The BBC was strategic in putting this out at a certain time to try to defame the Prime Minister and distract certainly voters in the world on something that has gone through a due process. The Prime Minister was found innocent on all levels.
So, you know, when you say that there was strategic in its timing and the content, people in India at least are turning around and saying, why? Why would they do it? They're just doing it because they are a media house.
Well, you know, we see the same problems in the United States that India is facing, that a lot of the world faces, when the media likes to create their own narratives and opinions, certainly to try to influence or persuade the conscience of everyday citizens. And so what is happening with this documentary in India is not something new. It's happening across the world. But what I will say is so important for the beautiful citizens of India, my beloved family in India, and Indian communities across the world, and certainly Indian Americans, my family here in the United States, is to see the positives of what Prime Minister Modi has done in the context of positioning India as a real global economic power. And that is the truth. You know, all of these other things that are presented certainly in this documentary, you know, unfortunately, is creating an unnecessary narrative, a distraction to the truth. And so I think this week, as you're approaching Republic Day celebration, I think this is an important week to focus on what the Prime Minister has done to bring India to greater measures of freedom. That is the truth. And if you look at the facts, the Prime Minister has certainly positioned India to provide greater measures of free enterprise, greater opportunity, freedom and measures for women, greater opportunities towards freedom in the context context of positioning the country in the region and across the world. So America will always stand with its friends, and we stand with India. We certainly stand in support of the Prime Minister. You heard that from our State Department spokesperson earlier, and that will change based on voices of colonialism or opinion pieces that are put out before an election, for sure.
Well, I'm going to leave it at that because I think you have summed up pretty much what the sentiment is right now, largely in India, when you speak of free speech versus free spin and propaganda. Thank you very much, Mary Millben. Very interesting voices that we are getting to hear from across the world. All right, let me take this across to the panel joining us now. Sanjay Chad, this is getting to be very awkward that, you know, there was an effort to try and get a response from the US State Department, from the UK Prime Minister, and everyone's pretty much said thanks, but no thanks. Where does this leave this whole documentary and its indictment of Mr. Modi?
First and foremost, this is a British Foreign Office report. So I think this whole conversation that it is a BBC hit job is absolute rubbish. The BBC is only the messenger. It is a British government's official report. So Mr. Sunak can go in the House of Commons and try and say that he doesn't agree with the characterization of Mr. Modi. But Mr. Sunak, is he denying the government report itself?
Very good point, because that is the reason why we actually spoke to, very good point you've raised. So let me answer that. We were speaking earlier to Bob Blackman, and a lot of things that we see here from India, we don't realize that a lot of domestic politics is involved. And he said very clearly that the then Foreign Secretary had a very large Pakistani origin population in his own constituency, so a lot of motivations are drawn from there as well. But if I can steer you back to the point, sir, of how for the longest time America was held up by you and your party as the ultimate certificate of who Mr. Modi is and his indictment in 2002, because they denied him a visa. Today that same America is saying, and I quote, "I'm not familiar with the documentary. However, I am very familiar with the shared values that enact the United States and India as two thriving and vibrant democracies." Now, America is agreeing with the government led by Mr. Modi. Surely democracy is dead.
Padmaja, a quick response to you. Please, you are a seasoned journalist. Let us not follow the usual diplomatic trope and the boilerplate statements. For God's sake, let's not waste our time on that. This is the same. I don't know whether Ms. Millben is even aware that President Barack Obama went back from India after attending the Republic Day and then censured the Indian government for saying, please demonstrate religious tolerance in your country because you could do with more diversity. And by the way, the US government banned Mr.
So why, I'm still curious, why would you still hang on to what Barack Obama did? But you would not react to what the present US administration has said. You will react to what Mr. Vajpayee said in 2002, but you will not react to what the Supreme Court of India has said in 2022. Because a part of that history suits you, so you will stick to that. But the present fact staring us in the face, you will ignore. Why?
Well, let me tell you this. When you become Prime Minister, you get a lot of diplomatic immunity. But let me answer the fundamental.
Well, maybe then he got a lot of diplomatic pushback because of not being the Prime Minister at that time and somebody inimical to his politics being in government at that time. Using your logic.
May I? Padmaja, can I just make my point?
Yes, go on.
Why this government, if it's so convinced that everything is clean, Mr. Modi is above board, why has it panicked? Why has it actually put a stop on people watching it in India? Point number one. Point number two, look at the statements of the Supreme Court, and I'll give you 3 instances.
Okay, so let's take your point, because just a second. So let's take this one by one. Wait, the important question, if you have nothing to hide, why are you panicking and banning, Sanju Verma? If you have nothing to hide, why are you panicking and banning?
Now I did not heckle Sanjay Jha. I want my time. First and foremost, the Modi government has absolute authority and prerogative to decide what it wants to be banned and what should not be banned. And this is not about freedom of speech. This is not about free expression. This is not about, not wanting to take on board constructive criticism. I want to tell through your channel, the Congressy and leftist ecosystem, there is a very thin line between constructive criticism and defamation. once the top court of India on the 24th of June 2022 in a bench led by Justice M. Khanvilkar clearly said there was no criminal conspiracy by Narendra Modi, and goes on to say that the petition filed by Zakia Jafri is devoid of merit, and further goes on to say that Teesta Setalwar's dubious antecedents need to be further investigated, and further goes on to say that the entire Gujarat riots investigation was done by the erstwhile Congress dispensation with an ulterior motive to keep the pot boiling. The Supreme Court of India has spoken. Now, who is BBC to undermine India's judicial process?
Then you should sue the BBC, but that
otherwise?
still doesn't justify invoking emergency powers to ban the documentary.
Padmaja, you allowed a free run to Sanjay Chad.
No, but I have to cross-question you. This is not about the BBC. We have called out the BBC's fallacies or their factual inaccuracies often enough. But that's not the point. The point is, when you try and muzzle this documentary, invoking emergency powers, by the way, then you end up looking as petulant, one, and two, as somebody who has something to hide. Not doing yourself any favors.
Padmaja, you asked a question, now let me respond. Let's be very clear. Let's not kid ourselves, let's not fool ourselves. I think Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been the most viciously trolled global statesman across decades in recent history. We are not averse to criticism, but we are averse to a documentary which is based on conjectures, opinions, testimonies, surmises, and as the government has said while banning it, if you listen to the conversation between Arindam Bagchi and some of the journalists who questioned in 10 seconds, he clearly said we will not allow something which undermines the territorial integrity and sovereignty of India and has the ability.
But madam, then in that case, how is this any different from those people who said that Kashmir files should be banned because it is creating fresh enmity between Hindus and Muslims in Kashmir? Well, you may not consider it. One man's truth is another man's propaganda. My point is, the moment you put a ban, you're in the same corner, Ms. Sanju Verma, as those who sought a ban on Kashmir files. You are calling this propaganda, they called Kashmir files propaganda. I am not calling it propaganda, but I am saying that when you put a ban, you are in the same corner as those who asked for a ban on Kashmir files, and both must be equally denounced. It cannot be supported. You want to call out BBC? You make another documentary which shows how fallacious BBC's portrayal of 2002 is. That's the way to go about it.
You don't allow people to, air what they want to say on your channel, and you're sitting here and giving me a bhashan.
Who didn't allow me to air anything that I want? What am I not allowing? I am asking you a cross question, ma'am. Anyway.
No, so let me answer.
Okay, answer.
If Padmaja Joshi, please don't heckle me. Because, you guys, and when I say you guys, I mean most journalists here don't need to sit and give a bhashan to BJP on free speech.
Ma'am, you just gave a bhashan to the Congress.
No.
But then you have to be, Caesar's wife has to be above reproach.
The question has the audacity to even digest my answer.
Go on.
You are trying to equate Kashmir files with BBC documentary. Kashmir files is the hard truth about what happened to Kashmiri Pandits. BBC documentary tends to undermine India's judicial process and a Supreme Court
ma'am, the judge of that will be the viewing public. No government should step in and censor invoking emergency powers, because that only bolsters the argument of those who want to show India as an authoritarian state. Tomorrow, this documentary should have been viewed by people who would have turned around and said, I watched it, it's a load of rubbish. That is the best answer. But the people should be allowed to decide. All right, that being said, let me please steer this back. Listen, I have no brief for any party or any government. If you want to have the truth told, then you also must have the permission, or you must give the freedom to other people to let their truth be told and let people judge. Anyhow, ma'am, please let me get in the other speakers as well. All right. Mr. Anthony, so here we had within the Congress people who said that by allowing such documentaries and giving it credence, personal differences and political differences are winning over national interest. I want you to listen in to what Anil Anthony, who is a Congress member from Kerala, had to say. Listen in.
We have our courts, we have our internal institutions, and we may not agree with whatever is coming out of there, or we may not like what we are seeing, but we shouldn't let the internal political differences among us be used as tools by external agencies or outside countries or unfriendly countries to create division here or slow down India's trajectory. So this is what I had meant from, and this is what I had very clearly specified in my tweet also.
Allowing personal differences to undermine India. Mr. Anthony, yes, the question is to you.
Good evening. Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for having me on this evening. I find it quite extraordinary, to be honest. The lady from the BJP, if she is so aggrieved by this, she used a term that I would welcome her to turn into action. Go to the UK and prosecute the BBC for defamation. But banning and subverting and trying to suppress, that's not going to be the way to do it. You quite rightly pointed out that one person's propaganda may well be the other person's truth. So going about it this way, and this Mr. Anthony's, my namesake's comments about, foreign countries and foreign agencies, well, we are in a global community. If he is so aggrieved by foreign organizations and foreign agencies, well, then why do we do business with them?
No, that's not the point. The point is, today if the Congress and the left, so hold on a second. Today if the Congress and the left are piling on or piggybacking on this documentary, is this really about free speech, or is this about their own political interest and what they stand to gain from this documentary? Let's be clear about that first. Is this about free speech or political benefits to be had from this documentary?
I vehemently support the second part. It is no doubt political point scoring, but we can only have a healthy political discourse and point scoring if we don't go muzzling each other. Ironically, today, the BJP government are using the very tools of suppression and silence that the Congress government had brought into law. So the irony should not be lost here. So if we're going to have that political discourse and sparring, well, then let's have it without muzzling each other.
Let's not pretend this is about free speech. Sanju Verma respond. I'll go back to Sanjay Chad. Let's not pretend this is about any free speech. Yes, Sanju Verma.
Yeah. To try and say that one man's truth could be another man's propaganda. Next, this Mr. Anthony, he will say that let us, try and also dispute the fact that during World War II, there was no genocide, there was no Holocaust. The Nazis did not, persecute 6 million European Jews who were put into gas chambers and externed. Are you denying the Nazi Holocaust? Next, you will tell me, Muslims are not being held in concentration camps by China in Xinjiang. Next, you will tell me that, the BBC never apologized for wrongfully claiming that Syria used chemical weapons. The BBC also had to apologize for wrongfully claiming that Prince Charles had an affair with the nanny of Prince William. The BBC has also apologized for wrongfully claiming that child labor was used by one of the largest Irish retail chains called Primark. The BBC has also apologized to the New York policy of HIV.
But what's your point?
It wrongfully quoted 8 scientists. I am telling you, BBC has zero credibility. And who is Jack Straw, who has been mentioned so often?
So then let the people figure it out. Let the people figure it out. All these facts that you know about the BBC, the people are also capable of figuring it out by themselves. The state cannot nanny your people and say you watch this and you don't watch this. And on that I remain very clear. But let me please bring in Akashdeep Muni as well. Hold on a second.
No, but I want to finish. This is not about free speech. speech, Padmaja Joshi, that is where you're wrong.
Ma'am, hold on. Akashdeep Muni also has free speech and he hasn't had any speech so far. So let him at least have one speech so far. Okay, Akashdeep Muni, today we had the DYFI, the SFI, every left-leaning organization saying we are going to screen this documentary across the country. Let me remind you that this is the same left which in September 2015, the Malayalam film titled TP51, which portrays the life of revolutionary Marxist party leader TP Chandrasekharan, who was stabbed to death with 51 stab wounds, was on an undeclared ban. Subsequently, CPM MP John Brittis wrote to Union Home Minister Amit Shah urging action against the mischievous teaser of the film, The Kerala Story. So when it comes to uncomfortable truths, the left has to face, they want a ban. But Modi film has to be the ultimate truth. There you want free speech. How?
Now, Padmaja, I will not go into whataboutery. I'll be on one point where Sanju Verma ji was speaking, and you know, the speech was a speech of a tyrant, an autocratic speech. Now, this autocratic speech like this. हम जो दिखाएंगे तुम वो देखोगे, हम चाहेंगे तो हम बैन करेंगे. This is the credibility of the government when they speak.
But sir, I literally just told you how the Kerala government has done it, the Congress government has done it. I think every child knows about Andhi, every child knows about Kishore Kumar. Lata Mangeshkar recently spoke about her, about how Hridaynath Mangeshkar was censured. So every government does it. Today, if any party is standing up and saying, oh, we are doing it because of free speech, no sir, you are not. You are doing it because you want to use it for elections. Let's be clear about motivations.
No, let me remind you. In 2014, our honorable Prime Minister said कि criticism होना चाहिए सरकार की.
I agree with that. I agree with that. But again, I come back to the point that if today people want to laud and piggyback India the Modi question, they are doing it because they want to use it for elections. Anyhow, like I said, Sanju Verma, not really seeming very, convincing over here when you ban a film and then accuse Congress of dictatorial behavior. Sanju Verma. Yes.
Okay. I will repeat, Padmaja. I am not here to convince you or anybody else. I repeat with full confidence, there is a difference between constructive criticism and undermining the sovereignty of the nation. And the Modi government in this case has the prerogative to decide that will allowing this film to be aired in India fan communal passion. It felt, yes, indeed that is the case, so we decided to ban. And who is the ecosystem that is blaming us? Trinamool Congress actually picked up Ambikesh Mahapatra in 2012 from his house at midnight only because he shared a meme on Mamata Banerjee. But you want Modi government to air BBC documentary despite Supreme Court exonerating Prime Minister Modi.
I want both.
June 2022.
I want both. I want Ambikesh Mahapatra to be free to share his cartoons and people to decide whether it is funny or it is terrible. And equally, people can watch this documentary and decide whether it is full of false. Read also about what happened in 2002. Read the Gujarat judgment of the Supreme Court and make your mind up for yourselves. That is the only way democracy can survive and thrive. Thanks very much, all gentlemen. Sanju Verma for joining me.